Hello. My guest for today's show is Justice Stanley Feldman. He is the Supreme Court Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court. We want to talk a little bit about the court and what it does and several of the things that are going on in the legal world today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice being here.
You practiced for 25 years in Tucson.
I did.
Before you went up to the Arizona Supreme Court. You graduated.
All right, we'll call it that, yes.
What does the Arizona, we all hear of course, the United States Supreme Court. What does the Arizona Supreme Court do for us as citizens?
About the same thing for the state of Arizona that the United States Supreme Court does for the United States as a whole. We are, as you know, an appellate court, meaning we hear cases after they have been tried, and after they have been appealed to the Arizona Court of Appeals, then we are the last or highest court in Arizona to consider the case. And our decision is binding except on the very few cases each year that go from us to the U.S. Supreme Court. I would say maybe 3 or 4 at the most per year go any further. So by and large we have the final say-so as to the interpretation and application of law in the state of Arizona.
Does a case, if I'm in trouble and I want the Supreme Court to hear my case, do I have to always be heard by you first before the Supreme Court of the nation will take it?
No, if you have a case, you're talking about the United States Supreme Court,
yes.
How you get there. Well, you can get there one of 2 ways. Either go up through the state court system, through the Arizona Supreme Court, and then file a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court to consider the case because it has some federal, what they call a federal question. Or you can start out in the United States District Court here in Arizona and go up through the federal court system and try and get to the United States Supreme Court. In either event, the chances of your getting to the U.S. Supreme Court are very, very dim. They take very few cases, and 1,200 a year, perhaps from the whole country. So as far as questions of state law are concerned, however, you have no chance at all getting to the U.S. Supreme Court. We are the last step there.
What would fall under that jurisdiction? When you just said under state law, you are the last resort, for instance.
Well, for instance, almost everything that affects your daily life. If you get hit by a car, or get in a fight with your business partner, or have a contract dispute over your home, or buy some real estate and have a dispute with the seller, or are charged with a crime under the the laws passed by the Arizona legislature, or any one of all the things that go on in your everyday life that are liable to end you up in court, the Arizona Supreme Court is really the court of last resort for you. If you have some question that pertains to the Constitution of the United States, freedom of religion question, for instance, or something like that, you then have a chance to get to the United States Supreme Court. But on most of the things that affect or afflict, if we can use that word, the ordinary person, the state court system is their place where they seek relief, and the Arizona Supreme Court is the highest court in the state.
Does the justice system work? So many people are so frustrated. They say, well, you know, I'll never get justice because it's going to take years and years and years, and lots of legal fees.
Well, without being facetious, let me answer that by asking you a question. Does the telephone system work? Usually when I make a telephone call, if I get who I want, and I usually get who I want fairly efficiently, sometimes I get very frustrated, and I don't have to explain all the things that can happen. I think by and large the justice system works pretty well, given the amount of resources devoted to it and the amount of manpower or woman power available to it. It works far from perfectly, and it makes mistakes, and it will continue to make mistakes, and it has always made mistakes, and everything human and administered by human beings is imperfect and makes mistakes. But I think it does pretty well with the vast number of cases that it has.
We'll come back in a moment, and I want to ask Justice Feldman, in his years as a trial lawyer, what he thought of the juries. Were they usually on the mark, or did they usually miss? We'll be right back. My guest is Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court, Stanley Feldman. He practiced for 25 years in Tucson, and he was a civil trial lawyer. Now he is on the scholarly end of the law practice. I was thinking about the Chicago 7 case and how that had maximum publicity, and it finally went to court, and the jury came in, and at that time it seemed to me that the jury took a lot of hodgepodge, a lot of raw emotion, and came up with a good decision. As a trial lawyer, both in cases that you won and you lost, and in the crime cases where people usually think of the murder cases and so on, are our juries usually on the mark? Do they come in with a fair verdict?
I think so. I've tried a lot of jury cases, and I was always, and still am, a great believer in the jury system. It is so hard to tell, to reconstruct events, and we all know that, and to do it in the courtroom in front of a jury. There's never any way really to know, to look into someone's mind, what were they thinking when they did a certain thing and all. I think jurors do as well with that kind of thing as anybody could, better than most. I think that they apply common sense and ordinary experience to the problems that come into the courtroom, and that they come up with they reach fair decisions. And one thing I know is they try, despite what you hear and all the baloney we get fed a lot. I think jurors really try. They try their best and their darndest to reach a fair decision and to apply the law as the judge explains it to them, and to reach to do justice. I have always noticed how people who are much more casual and gripe and this and that about the justice system, when they get on a jury, they're different. There's something happens to them in that courtroom. They take their oath as jurors, and I think most of them do their very darndest to live by that oath. Now, sure, you may get an occasional juror who doesn't, but remember, one of the great things about the jury system is it's not all up to one person or two people. You get a jury of 8 or 12, and so if you get somebody who's not what they ought to be in the jury room, you're quite likely to have somebody who's much better than you have any right to expect and who will control the situation. I think the jury system is good.
That brings to mind a question about the treatment of minorities in our court system throughout the land. A general question, not anything specific in mind, because I know you can't speak of anything specific. But many of the leaders of minority groups say that minorities do not get a fair break in our justice system, in our criminal system, that there are more who are prosecuted and found guilty. On the other hand, the average citizen says, my gosh, if they try these cases any longer, especially in crime where people spend years and years before they're finally punished for bad crimes, the average citizen might be saying, well, the justice system doesn't work. The minority leaders are saying it works against us. How do you feel?
I don't think that racial prejudice, ethnic prejudice, and so forth, has as much effect in the court system as it does in ordinary life. Now, it would be foolish to say that the justice system is unaffected by prejudice, because the justice system is made up of people, and people come with prejudices. Everyone comes with some prejudice, and some people, unfortunately, come with a lot of prejudice. But I would think, in my observation and experience, that there is less prejudice, or prejudice, let's put it this way, prejudice has less of an effect on results in the justice system than it does in any other part of life, because one thing that the court system makes a very strong effort to do is to minimize as much as possible the effects of prejudice. So it would be foolish to say that prejudice
How?
Well, for instance, jurors who are called to the box are selected by methods, at least in this state and in most states. I can't speak for some of the southern states, but in this state and most of the states, jurors are chosen at random. You get people of all races, all backgrounds, all ethnic makeups. Supposedly, you get a cross segment of the community. We do not allow lawyers to make a concerted effort to keep people of a particular religion or race out of the jury system. We don't permit questioning in the ordinary case, don't permit questioning jurors about what religious beliefs they hold. We don't permit questioning witnesses about their religious beliefs. The judge tries in every way to convey to the jurors the idea that they are to be impartial and to follow the law, and the law has the blindfold. The blindfold is not to keep from looking at facts, but to keep from seeing things that are irrelevant, such as ethnic background, racial background and so forth. So I think the judge, and I think the trial judges do a good job that way. And the trial judges, and I've seen a lot of trial judges in 25 years of practicing law, I have not seen very many that had any prejudice that affected their work. I have seen a lot of trial judges who made a conscious effort every day to be as fair and impartial as they could. I won't say trial judges aren't prejudiced. Everybody has some prejudice, but I think that by and large they make just a great effort to be fair and to be impartial, and I think they succeed.
We'll be back in a moment, and I want to ask Justice Feldman about what he thinks about violence today as it's coming up in the courts and what's going on in American society. While we were in break, our camera person, Peter O'Brien, was agreeing with you. We were missing Peter for a good couple of weeks because he was on jury duty.
Yeah, and he agreed with me. He said that the jurors tried and did a good job in his analysis. That's what I have seen. By and large, I think the jurors did just an excellent job.
Now in reviewing cases on the Arizona Supreme Court, you've now been there how long?
Since January of '82, 2.5 years more or less.
Violence in our society, is it becoming more, or are we just reading about it more and hearing about it? And do you have any theories about what's going on in our society?
Well, I think, I don't know whether there's more violence than there was, but the impression I get is there is worse violence than ever there was. It's an impression I get from just what I read coming across my desk in the way of cases. And you have to remember, I did not practice in the criminal law for the last 20 years when I was out in practice. So I came to the bench fairly inexperienced, let's say, in at least the later trends in the criminal law. I wonder at some of the cases I see, where do we get these people from? What makes people this way? What makes them this twisted? What causes people to do things like this? I have no answer to that. But violence, unnecessary, mindless, needless, and cruel, I think it's something new. I haven't lived in a cave all these years. I think it's getting worse, or has gotten worse. Maybe now it's starting to trend off the other way. But yeah, I would think that it has gotten worse. Say I have no, I'm not an expert on the subject. I have nothing but my observation from my work.
Do you think TV contributes to that?
Again, I'm not an expert, but I have a resounding yes to that. I think TV contributes to it, and I think the movies contribute to it. I'm not advocating censorship, but well, the analogy, the pornography. If we ran pornographic movies on network TV every night, everybody would probably justifiably be up in arms saying it's bad for the children and it's bad for young people to see this. And I think there'd be general agreement. I can't imagine why running violence all the time, and so that violence becomes a part of life. It's just sort of an ordinary people shooting people, people beating on people, so it's just part of what kids see as the way life is lived. I think it's got to harden young people. Again, I'm not an expert. That's just my own personal view.
Would there be any way, taking that view that you just took, is there any way under the freedoms guaranteed to us by the Bill of Rights to do anything about that? Or are we just stuck with it?
Well, I think if you live in a free society, people have a right to publish what they want within tolerable limits, and people have a right to make the kind of movies they want, and people have the right to control their children as to what they want, what movies they're allowed to see, and what they can watch on television. And I think to a large extent, you're stuck with that, or blessed with it, both, I suppose. There's no one that can tell network producers and movie makers not to put in violent scenes in movies. We have to control that ourselves simply by people can tell their children, no, you can't go to this, or people can stay away in droves, and then won't be that kind of movies made, because if there's not a customer, there's not going to be a movie for it.
Are sex crimes in our society increasing?
Well, I think I have the same answer for that that I had for the question of violence. Lately, crime statistics have started to go down, as you probably have read in the newspaper. Most people think because the number of young people is getting smaller, we're now into that part of the population cycle. But one of the other things that I was surprised at when I took office is the number of sex crime cases that come our way. And we, as I indicated earlier, don't get every case in the state, just the ones that come from the trial court to the Court of Appeals, and then the ones we take after that, which is a fairly small number. But I frankly had no idea that incest was as often an occurrence as it is, that child molestation was as common an occurrence as it is, and it is quite frightening also. Again, how do the people get that way? What turns people into this? How do you stop it? Which is always, you see, by the time we get it, it's already happened. And of course there's all sorts of comments, well, let's lock them away for life and they won't do it anymore. But that's a sheer impossibility quite often, simply because the state couldn't afford to keep everybody locked away for life. It costs $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 per year per prisoner. So a lot of the question is, once you've caught them, once you've convicted them, once you've put them in prison, and you know that sooner or later, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, 30 years, sooner or later they're going to get out. What do you do with them while they're in there so that you have some hope that when they get out, they won't do the same thing all over again? At the moment, we do very, very little in the way of rehabilitation, cure, reformation, whatever you want to call it. And that's one of my great worries about our present system. I don't know how much you can do with sex criminals. There's, of course, a lot of debate about the success or failure of psychiatry in dealing with sex criminals. But of all the sex criminals we have in the present prison system, I think there are only about 100 per year, maybe 150 per year, who are getting any form of or any attempt at rehabilitation. And all of those people, you know, there may be 2,000 like that in there, and they're all going to get out someday. So 100 a year is not very much of an approach to the problem.
We'll be back in a moment, and I want to ask Justice Feldman about the role of television in the court system. My guest is Justice Stanley Feldman, who is on the Arizona Supreme Court. He practiced law for 25 years in Tucson, a graduate of the U of A Law School, and was past president of the Arizona Bar. TV and the legal system. It's going on in some states. That the famous New Bedford trial, when CNN broadcast the trial, and there were a lot of people that said that the woman had to move out of the state because of it. What are your thoughts?
Well, we have a rule which the Supreme Court adopted in Arizona, which permits television in Arizona courtrooms. So if a television station or a network wish to broadcast a trial, for instance, in Pima County, they go to the trial judge and get his permission, set up cameras, and
now can the judge in Arizona say, okay, but you can't show the juror's face and the defendant's
face? The rule
face?
we pass says you cannot show the juror's face. No one can give them permission to show the juror's face. We do not wish to make jurors participants in television programs. A lot of jurors wouldn't like that. A lot of jurors would worry about that, and we don't want them to have that concern. So they're told, even when the trial is going to be televised, that their faces will not be on television.
What about, say, a woman testifying in a rape case?
That's up to the judge's discretion. The trial judge can, I think in all cases like that, they do order the television not to take the picture of the woman's face. So he has discretion about that.
Do you think that works? Does that serve justice to have the TV cameras there?
No, I don't. I guess I ought to explain that. I think it could work. I think it should work, and I wish it would work. I was opposed as a lawyer to the idea of televising trials because I thought the cameras would interfere in the conduct of the trial. I find out that I was wrong. It can be done so that the camera doesn't interfere if everybody is careful. But it takes a lot of effort to be careful, and the judge gets involved with this, and the lawyers get involved with this. And it does have some effect on the witnesses and lawyers and judge, I would suppose, perhaps a minimal effect. But that would be all right if it did some good. And the reason that we passed the present rule, which after a year's experiment, now on an indefinite basis permits televising courtroom trials, is that the television stations and the networks had a seminar for us and brought in some people and showed us what they could do. And on the basis of what they could do in the way of televising court proceedings, I, for one, thought it would be good to let them do it. So we made the rule in there, and now they're in the courtroom. But they haven't done anything like what they showed us they could do. Instead, what you get is 20 seconds of a picture of somebody in a courtroom with a voiceover telling you what happened. They don't need to go through all this trouble and put the court and the judge through the trouble and take the time for a 20-second voiceover shot. They could just do it with a sketch artist, or just have the reporter go and watch the trial and come back and give you his 20-second or her 20-second bit. So I'm unhappy with what we're doing now. I don't think it's educational at all.
I have a quick question for you. Practicing attorney, very successful attorney in Tucson for 25 years. Now you're appointed to be a Supreme Court justice. Were you scared?
Scared?
Yeah.
No. I was aware of the responsibility and aware of the necessity of discharging the responsibility. The debt, so to speak, of having to do as good a job as I could do. And at times I'm afraid of not doing right, because sometimes it's impossible to know what's right. It's just like it's impossible sometimes to know who's lying and who's telling the truth. But again, I'm a human being and I'm going to make my share of mistakes. But I wasn't scared of the job, no. I thought I could do the job or I wouldn't have taken it.
Well, we thank you for sharing some insights on the justice system in Arizona with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us on Talk It Over.